Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. Hello. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I am excited to dive into today's topic. I don't know why it's taking me so long to record this episode. Probably because I'm going to, tell you some very real, honest things about me. This isn't a topic that is very important to me, as many of you know. I'm going to talk about chosen family today. I'm going to talk about what it is, why it matters, and most importantly, how you build these relationships in your life. Now, as I mentioned, I have talked about chosen family before. Probably the most raw, honest, is that real? The most raw and honest episode I've done. In episode 19, it's called The One for Little Alex. I talked a lot about chosen family and why I need chosen family and what it's like living in a world where our main kind of foundational support system, right, our family of origin is kind of this family is everything, and how that messaging impacts someone that doesn't have that experience. So if you want to hear about my experience, that was a doozy of an episode to record. I'll never actually forget. I recorded that and then had to go lay down because I had so much anxiety about it, so much vulnerability, like a vulnerability hangover. I've also done episode 16 with my friend, Jeff, who is somebody I consider chosen family. And we talked a lot about this, especially because he comes from a great family of origin situation, like what his experience is. So it's definitely not the first time I've talked about it, but I've never really done an episode like I'm doing today, which is one where I go a little deeper into just kind of my overview of how I see these relationships and how we're going about building them in our lives. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about how I look at chosen family. Like, what is chosen family? What does that actually mean to me? These are the people who, through their words, their intentions, and their actions, choose you, and you choose them back. This is an active relationship. You're both making an active choice to show up for each other, work through the hard things, and consider each other's best interests, each other's feelings, and both people's goals. At the end of the day, I think the chosen family are the people who you are committing to consider. I'm not saying you plan your whole life around them, but you are making a choice to consider them in the ways that you act and the ways that you show up and the things that you say. And if you think about it, consideration is actually one of the biggest ways to show care, right? It means that you are being thoughtful and attentive to that person, whether they are in front of you or not. And in doing so, I believe that consideration is one of the ways that you build some of the deepest roots. And if you go back and you listen to episode 12, that's where I talk about my roots of connection framework. Consideration, I don't specifically say that in there, but that is at the core of the whole thing. And when I look at chosen family, a concept that I live out regularly, the real joy of these relationships is that this person is picking you, is considering you, is showing up for you purely just because of who you are. That's it. There's no strings attached. There's no other reason. There's no legal reason. There's no biological reason, right? They care about you. And that's really powerful. In a world where we all doubt whether we belong or whether we're loved, it's really powerful when you feel that choice. Now, something else I'll say, and I've said this in many an episode, is the broader societal definition of chosen family doesn't normally include our family of origin. But I like to include them. If you feel like your family of origin, your extended family, considers you, they show up in your best interest and your feelings and your goals, and you do the same, that you're both putting in the work, then in my mind, they're part of your chosen family, and I'm sure you're part of theirs. Like at the end of the day, to me, chosen family is kind of that core group, that web, that support system that is holding you up as we move through life. Because as we all know, we cannot go through life alone. So these are the people that catch you when you fall, but also help springboard you to the next iteration of your life, the next you. And so the reason I bring up that web analogy is because sometimes I think when we explore this idea of chosen family, people get this all or nothing mindset, right? Like these people, my chosen family, need to show up for me in every way, be available for everything, right? They are the people that are going to catch me, and therefore they should be able to catch me in any way. We've had many an episode around here about getting rid of the all or nothing mindset. Episode 33 with NChem, we dive deep into this, how we have to stop thinking about our friendships as all or nothing. And I think chosen family is kind of the same way. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples, but if you can let go of this all or nothing mindset, you're going to find that you can create a much stronger web. Now, the all or nothing mindset, I do think, like, I get why people have it. There are some, not tons, but some examples of chosen family out there in the media, in different shows, social media, things like that. And when I watch it, what I see is a lot of messaging of like, this person is my person. This group saved me from my absolute rock bottom. And so I get why we get this all or nothing mindset, because that's kind of what we're being shown, right? There aren't a lot of other examples that I'm seeing out there. If you are seeing this more gray area example, I would love to see them. Please send them my way, because I'm not seeing that, and I'm looking, I promise. But I don't live that way. And I currently live in the stage of my life where I feel the most supported I've ever felt, pretty much entirely by chosen family. There's some members of my immediate family that fall in that category, but a lot of it is friends and community of all types. And it's because I've created this web. Now, some of the people in my web fill a variety of buckets, a variety of needs. They show up for me in a variety of ways. But there are some people who really just fill one bucket or show up for me in one way. And some of those people are filling a really vital role. I'm going to share more of those roles in a little bit, but like, I need someone to fill that role in my web. And honestly, it's such an important role that if I needed it, I might need a backup and a backup to the backup. So these people in my web might fill just that. Now, some of these people might grow more over time. They might fill more roles. And I think it's also important to note that some people might fill a lot of roles, and then for whatever reason, whatever circumstances, somebody in your chosen family might need to kind of take a step back. And that doesn't mean necessarily, it might mean, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are no longer your chosen family. It might just mean that their portion of the web is a little smaller for this season of life, and you need to shuffle around and put in some of the alternates or fill some spaces. Now, the reason that I think the web analogy works for me, the reason I ended up here, is because I didn't really have any other option. I've talked about this before in a variety of episodes. The fastest way is to go to my website and listen to my founder's story, but I really was at that rock bottom where I needed support. I didn't have it. My family of origin was not it. And when you're there, I think a lot of people look for just one person, right? That one person that's going to save them. Sometimes we're lucky enough to find that person. But more often than not, these people continue to not feel like anything will catch them. And quite frankly, I think that I was just desperate enough that I was willing to lean into this web idea. And when I tell you it, I think it's the way to go. I really do. And I've talked to a variety of other people who are in a similar situation who have also built a web. And they're like, yeah, nobody knows what they're missing out on. So what I'm going to tell you is that a lot of people, a lot of you are just quite frankly not desperate enough. That's why you haven't tried this yet. It's also not very normal to go about it this way. But as we do many a time here, we can break the mold. We can think outside the box. If we were all doing it right, we would all feel supported. And that is not how a lot of people feel. So instead of repeating the same patterns, we're going to try something different. I want to give you a little example of what I mean by me having kind of like built this web and why I was desperate. So a few years ago, gosh, when was this? Maybe 2021. That sounds about right. I had a breast cancer scare. I am fine. But in the moment, it was very scary. Like I was terrified. And the worst part is that once we had decided that it was concerning enough that they were going to schedule me for a mammogram and an ultrasound, I had to wait months. So I think if this had been kind of an immediate, I don't know, like next week, I probably mentally could have floated this on my own. But that was not the case. And I had to wait months and I was terrified. And I think what a lot of people would do in this situation is they would call their mom. And as many of you know, and if you don't know, my mom passed away when I was 13. There is no option to call my mom. And my family, quite frankly, is not who I'm calling. So what I did is call two of my closest friends, two of my chosen family. And when I tell you that this was not my most graceful moment, they definitely kind of knew that they were my medical people, sort of. But in looking back on it now, we had never like explicitly had this conversation. And that's something I'll talk about later is like how to have these conversations, sometimes in serious ways. I mean, I think in this situation, I could have just even mentioned they'd probably be the people I would call. I didn't do that. They had no idea. I was panicked. I will never forget it. I was sitting in my car, crying hysterically. I called up my friend C, and she answered. And the words like tumbled out of my mouth while I was hysterically crying. And I was like, I might have breast cancer and I don't know what to do. And I have to wait all this time. And I just started word vomiting. Again, this was not a graceful moment. Now, this is the best part of it all. She was getting a pedicure. And so she's like talking me through this. Mind you, she works in the medical field. That's part of why she's one of my medical people. She fills that part of my web. Apparently, the ladies in the nail salon were very concerned by the end of this phone call. Like everybody around was asking who I was and if I was okay. And C is just trying to talk me through this while she's at the nail salon. Our other friend, I think I maybe saw her. She's local. So I think I saw her and just brain dumped this whole thing on her, but she was not expecting it. And why am I telling you this story? Because a lot of people would just call their mom, and I don't have that option. So my option is to call my friends. And these friends knew that they were people that I would call. They definitely knew, right? We were that close. But I don't know if we'd ever explicitly talked about that they would probably be the people I called in a medical emergency. And a way for me to have gone about that would have, even just in a casual conversation, have been to say something like, hey, see, you work in the medical profession. If crap hit the fan in my medical life, like I'd probably be calling you in the middle of the night, just so you know. But I didn't give her any warning. But it really could be as simple as that. It could be the person that you call. Now, are these the people I would call for absolutely any situation? Like a lot. They fill a lot of my web, but definitely not my entire web, which is partially because they don't fit every role. And it's partially because that's a lot of responsibility to be the only person I could possibly call anytime I need help or need support. Which is why I think that there's so much power in this idea of like the roles. And I want to give you some specific examples I've seen of kind of some chosen family roles. A very serious example would be asking a friend or maybe a super extended family member or a community member. I mean, this could be your family of origin, but I think that's a given for a lot of people. So if we're thinking outside the box, it's picking someone outside of that like kind of societal norm to be your executor on your will or to be your medical power of attorney. For whatever reason, maybe you feel like the best person in your life that you trust with that is a friend, a community member, someone super extended out in your family. Another example would be asking someone to be your child's emergency contact. Now, this one I actually personally can speak to because I am a variety of people's child's emergency contact. And this was a very specific ask by a variety of friends. Some are very close. I'm very close with their kiddos. Others, I'd say like very familiar. They very much know who I am. But part of the reason was I am local. I am flexible because I work from home. They trust my judgment in an emergency situation. And their kiddos would have familiarity with me. Now, in my mind, that's a pretty big ask. I hope that never happens, but it's a responsibility. And although a lot of people might be like, oh, well, that's not chosen family, in one role, I kind of think it is. There's some weight to that ask. Could be somebody in your chosen family that's just like the person you call in the middle of the night, or the person you call when you find out you have to have an emergency mammogram for potential cancer scare. This could be the person who sits with you in hospital rooms. Maybe you found out you need a big surgery. I've heard from plenty of people, especially single people who are single in their adulthood, right? In their 30s, 40s, 50s, that this is actually a big one. That if you get sick, quite often the assumption is that either your immediate family, which may or may not be a possibility, maybe they don't live locally, or maybe they also need care and they're not available. It would be a romantic partner. If you're single, you don't have that option. Maybe it would be a best friend, but they don't live local. And so this might be a place where some of the other people in your life step in and really take on this very specific but very vital role. Another example could be somebody that you ask to go with you to scary doctor's appointments. Like, for example, when I had that breast cancer scare, my friend C, who does not live here, offered to fly up. And I, at the time, told her, I'm okay. I don't need to. I will just, like, if you could keep your phone available, like, I'll call you. That seems like a great intermediary option. But obviously, if I get bad news, like, then, yeah, I might take you up on that on some flights up here. Now, I've talked a lot about a bunch of serious and scary and bad reasons you might need some people for chosen family roles. But I want to talk about some other happy reasons. And this might be people that you celebrate holidays and birthdays and milestones with. Like, if you're somebody out there who is staring down this upcoming holiday season and just absolutely dreading it, then I would suggest to you to just spend a few minutes thinking about people that would make that day enjoyable, that would allow your nervous system to relax, where you could create fun memories and have a conversation with them about it. It doesn't have to be this big thing. You don't even need to make a specific ask. I've had a lot of luck with just saying like, hey, I don't really have anywhere that I want to go, like nowhere that feels good to me. And I want to go somewhere where I feel good. and kind of see where the conversation goes from there. You're not necessarily putting it on them, but I've had a lot of luck with being honest. Another chosen family role could be people that you create traditions with. Again, this is fun. This is silly. This is memories and growth and exploration. There could be so many traditions. I'm actually putting together an episode, so I don't want to list off too many. Tune back in next week to the next week's episode. But these would be people that, maybe you don't have a strong family of origin situation, but you've always watched people have like annual family trips that they take or reunions. And you wish you had that. And I'm here to tell you, you can have that. You can create that with other people. I have done exactly this. It is 100% possible. So don't believe that you can't have that if you don't have a great family of origin situation. Or even if you do, actually, even if you have a great family of origin situation, and that's just like not the way they show up for you in your life, you can have that. Now, I do want to pause for a second and just acknowledge something very important here. Because what I'm really talking about is like broadening and leaning into this idea of chosen family, even in small ways. But what I always have to say, what I always have to acknowledge is that for some communities and some people, like the LGBTQ plus folks, the Black communities who have been separated from their biological families for decades, people of color, groups of veterans, people overcoming addiction, people who've experienced childhood abuse. For many, many people out there, chosen family isn't just a nice to have. It is their entire support system. It's survival. It's often the way they find belonging in a world that tells them that they don't belong. So I always just like to bring that up because what I want to see, my goal in talking about chosen family is I want to see a world where chosen family becomes just as acceptable and normalized as our family of origins. That whoever you pick to have in your life is never questioned. And I believe that the way to do that is to see more people embrace chosen family relationships, even in smaller ways. And that doing that will create a more accepting world. But I just want to remember that that's currently not the world we live in. And just remember that as you grow your support network. That this might be a nice to have for you, but for some people, it is literally their survival tactic. And to keep, I guess, the same reverence about it that those people have, right? It's dire for them. It was dire for me. I think that's why. So with that caveat, now what I'm about to do is tell you some tips I have for how to build chosen family relationships in your life. Like I want to get really practical about how we are doing this. My first tip for you is to have direct conversations with people. This might look like actually directly asking someone to fill a role, right? Saying, hey, will you be my child's emergency contact? Will you be my medical power of attorney? Now, another way to have a direct, but maybe less intense conversation would be to just start being honest. I have had the most luck with this. That I think it's easy to just go through the world and pretend that we're fine, right? Everybody assumes you have this great support system. But once we start getting honest about the fact that there are big gaps in our web, I think you might be surprised by how people are willing to step up. The number of times I've just said things, like I mentioned before, right? Like, I don't really have anywhere I want to go for the holidays. When I tell you that now I have so many options just by being honest. Like this year for the holidays alone, I could go to 12 different places. I have an open invite. And it wasn't because I specifically asked each of those people. It was just because I was honest about my situation, and people would come back and make it very, very clear that they would love for us to be there anytime. And the final kind of piece of this direct conversations is to tell people why certain roles are important to you or why certain support is important to you, right? I think it can be easy for a lot of people. They're not having these direct conversations. It's just assumed that, let's say, if something bad happened in their life, their spouse would come sit with them in the hospital. It's not until somebody who's single says out loud they don't know who would come, but that would be important to them. They don't want to be in the hospital alone, that people might realize like, oh, that's something I could do if that ever arose. I really do think just being honest, even in small ways, you don't have to tell the whole backstory. You can if you choose to, but just stating the facts of kind of where you sit with your web has been really, really powerful for me. And my second tip is to take action, right? Because I've talked a lot about people showing up and supporting me, supporting you, but how are we also offering support back? And so one of the things I've done is take action. Like there are so many times where I have offered support before anybody's ever asked me for it. Now they can always say no, if a bunch of people say no, but I've also made it a really big point to show like, hey, I want to choose to show up in your life this way. I hope you also show up in my life this way. Can I come and help you at night with your new baby? Can I come and sit with you at the hospital? You know, I will plan to drive you to those appointments every Friday. They can always tell me no, but often if you make a very specific offer, people will realize that you are serious. And then of course, when you do go to take action, you need to show up. You got to do the thing you said you would do. And you got to do it consistently when you say you'll do it. And then the final piece of this take action is to continue to check in regularly. Like if you are the person who is going to the hospital with somebody and sitting there with them, check in. Like, is that really what they need after a while? Is there a different role? Maybe now they're starting to get nervous about going home and what they could use is actually somebody to go over to their house and help get it set up for them to come home with some different mobility issues, for example. My next tip for how to build chosen family is to make it official. Now, this doesn't apply in every scenario, but I do think that in a relationship or what we are looking for, right, is like safety, security, dependability. We want to know that our web is there. Sometimes something as silly as a name or an official act can give us this little sense of security, the same way that a marriage license or an adoption paperwork or a blood test to show that your family could give you a sense of it's official. We can do similar things here, right? You can put a name to the role. Now, that could be something super official, like updating an emergency contact form at a school and needing to like sign that. It could be showing that paperwork for somebody to be your medical power of attorney, but it could also just be the way you talk about this person, right? They're an auntie. They are my person. They are the person who always calms me down. You could come up with some little phrase. I don't want to get too specific here, but I have people in my life where there's like a phrase that we kind of say. It would be, I guess, similar to like a family motto. It's like a little reminder, a subtle reminder to us as we say hello and goodbye that we're still making this choice to show up for each other. So however you can make it official in your brain or on paper or legally if you need to, I think sometimes that can help. But it could be just as simple as kind of an agreement of like, hey, I will always fill this role for you to the best of my abilities, and you will always fill this role for me. And then actually doing it if that time ever arises. My final tip is just to continue to maintain these connections, your chosen family connections, through traditions and repetition. I think a lot of times when we think about, right, our family of origin, there are all these moments or milestones or traditions that we just end up having, right? Holidays, birthdays, family trips, annual reunions, family dinners on Sunday. There's no right or wrong way to create this, but a really strong way to show to one another that you are chosen family is through traditions and repetition. And the good news is you can create those at any time. You can create them. You can remake them. You can adjust them based on capacity. You can amp them back up again. There's no right or wrong way. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this because I am talking about this in next week's episode, but just really consider the traditions. I've had a lot of personal experience with this, and I think that this is one of the strongest ways to really feel that chosen family bond. Now, we are coming close to the end of this episode, but I want to acknowledge anybody here who is somebody and you're thinking like, okay, well, I listened to this episode, but like I have a strong family support system. So I don't know if I need this episode. And here's what I want to say to you. That if you are listening and you're thinking, I don't need this, I have a strong family support system, I love that for you. I really do. I wish that was my story, but it's not. But here's why this still matters. Because you are in a position, likely if this is you, where you could be chosen family for someone else. You could be part of their web, someone in their corner, and you could literally change their life. Because I know to you that feels like a given, but there are so many people out here who don't know who they would call. And you could be that person, even if it's only in a couple areas of life. Especially because it sounds like maybe you have a strong, stable web underneath you that will help hold you up. And I would tell you that you don't need to wait to be needed. Like if you see a friend in your life that you feel like maybe doesn't have as strong of a web as they need, you can take that action. You can offer support. You can be the one that strikes up the conversation and says, hey, if so-and-so, if something happened to you, pick whatever scenario feels right to you, I want you to call me. I would show up for you. Like that, it could be as simple as that. And you could repeat that over and over. And if that scenario ever rises, you're the one they call. Because at the end of the day, more love, more connection, more support never hurt anybody. And I know it sounds like you are giving. That's great. You might have a lot to give, but you never know what's going to come back to you. And if nothing else, you never maybe will really understand the difference that you're making to this person. I have some friends that I can think of who have a really, really strong family support system that are now part of my chosen family. And some of the things I depend on them for, they maybe never could have like fathomed that I would need that from a friend, right? They would assume they would just go to their family. And I think they've always thought, kind of it's a give. Well, they don't think it's a give. What I will say is because this is so vital to me, I definitely get creative on how I show up for them. They are not lacking. And I think that's probably what you would find with anybody who needs this. They understand how important it is, and they will move heaven and earth to show up for the people that are there in their web. Yeah, I think that's as specific as I want to be on that today. It's a hard line of what I share on the internet. Here's what I want to close out with. If you have found ways that chosen family shows up in your life that I didn't talk about today, I would love to hear about them. I would love to have a bigger list. I would love to have more examples. I would love to know how we are leaning on each other and showing up for each other. So share them with me however you feel comfortable. And who knows, maybe you'll inspire me with some new ways that I can show up in my people's lives or ask them to show up in mine. And I want you to remember that whether you are building chosen family out of necessity or by choice, that our chosen family matters. They make our lives richer, our support system stronger, and our world's a little bit better. So with that, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @it's Alex Alexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.